Welcome to the Explainer. All right, today we're tackling a word you're probably hearing more and more, biosimilars. It's a huge deal in medicine, but what exactly are they? How do they work? And maybe most importantly, why should you care? Let's dive right in.
Okay, so to really get a grip on biosimilars, we've got to start with what they're based on. And that's this incredible class of drugs called biological medicines. We're talking about treatments for things like cancer and autoimmune diseases. And for these conditions, they haven't just been a small step forward. No, they've been absolute game changers.
So, what's the deal? What makes a medicine biological in the first place? Well, it's all about where they come from.
You know, if you think about a drug like aspirin, that's made through chemical synthesis in a lab. Simple. But biologicals, they're made by living things. Yeah, you heard that right. We're talking about incredibly complex proteins and molecules that are actually produced inside living cells. It's not just a different recipe, it's like a whole different kind of kitchen for making medicine.
And the scale of these things is just wow. On the simple end, you've got something like insulin, still a protein, still complex. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have these gigantic, super intricate things called monoclonal antibodies. I mean, these are basically precision-guided missiles designed to hunt down and target specific things in the body, like cancer cells. The complexity is just mind-blowing.
Okay, so because these drugs come from living cells, there's this really interesting little quirk. Think about it. No two handmade sweaters are exactly alike, right? It's the same idea here. No two batches of a biological medicine are ever 100% identical. There's always this tiny natural variation. But, and this is super important, that variability is controlled so tightly to make sure it has absolutely no effect on how safe or effective the medicine is.
All right, so here's our game plan. We've got the basics of biologicals down. Next up, what is a biosimilar? How is it different from a generic? How do we know they're safe? And finally, why does any of this matter to you?
So, that leads us to the next big question. These amazing medicines are protected by patents, but those patents don't last forever. What happens when they run out?
Now, if this was a simple drug like ibuprofen, the answer's a no-brainer. A generic comes along. But for biologicals, remember that natural variation we just talked about? Well, that's what makes it so tricky. You literally can't make a 100% identical copy. It's just not possible.
And that, right there, is where the biosimilar makes its entrance. The name actually tells you everything you need to know. It's bio because, well, it's a biological medicine, and similar because it's a highly similar version of the original drug, what we call the reference medicine. Not identical, but highly similar.
Okay, but wait. Why not just call them generics and be done with it? Well, the distinction is so important. It really comes down to the massive difference between copying a simple chemical and recreating a super complex product made by living cells.
Yeah, this chart lays it out perfectly. A generic, it's an identical copy of a small, simple drug. Easy peasy. But a biosimilar, it's this large, complex thing from a living organism, so it can only be highly similar. And because of that complexity, the way they get approved is totally different. For generics, you pretty much just have to show it acts the same in the body. For biosimilars, they have to go through this whole intense process to prove they're just as safe and effective as the original. It's a whole different ballgame.
And that brings up a really important question, right? If it's not an exact copy, how in the world do we know for sure that a biosimilar is just as effective and just as safe as the medicine it's based on?
The answer is this incredibly thorough, step-by-step investigation called a comparability exercise. They start at the very foundation, on the molecular level, using super-sensitive lab tests to compare the structure and function. Then they move up a level, looking at how it works on cells. And finally, they do clinical studies in people, all to confirm one thing, that any of those tiny differences have absolutely no meaningful impact on how safe or effective the medicine is.
And here's the really clever part. Because they've proven it's so incredibly similar, the biosimilar can essentially rely on all the safety and effectiveness data that's already been gathered for the original medicine over many years. This is a huge win because it means we don't have to repeat all the same massive clinical trials all over again, which is better for everyone, especially patients.
And you know what? This whole comparability idea, it's not some new, untested thing. Nope. Regulators have been using the same scientific principle for decades. Anytime the company that makes the original drug makes a big change to their manufacturing process, say they build a new factory, they have to do these exact same kinds of tests to prove the medicine is still the same. So using this for biosimilars is just building on a safety system that's been in place for a long time.
Okay, so let's get to the bottom line. The question that matters most to any patient or doctor.
With all this talk about being similar but not identical, are these things actually safe?
The answer is a clear and simple yes. And we know this because the European Union has really been the pioneer here. They approved the very first biosimilar way back in 2006. That means we now have over a decade of experience with millions of patients, and all that real-world data shows the same thing over and over. Biosimilars are just as safe and just as effective as the reference medicines.
And the safety checks don't just stop once the drug is approved. Far from it. In Europe, you'll often see this black triangle symbol on biosimilars, just like on other new biologicals. Now, that doesn't mean there's a problem. It just means the medicine is being watched extra carefully as more people use it, to gather even more real-world safety info. It's like an extra layer of peace of mind.
So how do they do that monitoring? A huge piece of the puzzle is something called traceability. It's super important for doctors to write down the exact brand name and the specific batch number of the medicine a patient gets. Why? So that if there's ever any kind of issue, no matter how small, they can trace it back to its exact source, like instantly.
Okay, so we've established they're safe, they're effective, they're rigorously tested, but what does this all mean in the real world? What's the big picture here? Why should this matter to us?
Really, it all boils down to one powerful concept: competition. These biological medicines can be incredibly expensive. When their patent runs out and biosimilars can enter the market, it creates competition. And what does competition do? It drives down prices. That means these powerful, sometimes life-saving treatments can become more affordable and more accessible to the people and the healthcare systems that desperately need them.
All right, let's wrap this up with the key takeaways. 1. A biosimilar is a highly similar version of an existing biological medicine. 2. It has to meet the exact same high standards for quality, safety, and effectiveness. And 3. We have more than a decade of experience in the EU proving they can be used just as safely and effectively as any other biological medicine. They are a proven, essential part of the modern medical toolkit.
And that really leaves us with a huge question as we look to the future of healthcare, doesn't it? Could biosimilars be the key that finally unlocks access to cutting-edge medicine for everyone who needs it? It's a question that's about so much more than just science. It's about access, it's about cost, and it's about fairness. Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.